Hi, and welcome back to The Empathic Leader, where we talk all things empathy, emotional intelligence, and leadership. I am Dr. Melissa Robinson-Winemiller, and I'm so excited to have you here today. Please like, subscribe, and comment so that we can keep this conversation going, because that's really what I'm here for. In our world, we've actually got a lot of myths around empathy, what it is, what it isn't, what it can do, what it shouldn't do. And I'm here to try and dispel some of these myths so that we can actually use it strategically and effectively all the time. Yeah, I do talk about leadership because leadership, they have the ability to touch a lot of people, which means they can do a lot of good for a lot of people, or leaders can do a lot of harm to a lot of people. But I really believe this is something that could change society. So I would love to have you along for the ride so that we can talk about empathy and get rid of some of these myths so that we can all use it better. Let's keep the conversation going. So today I actually want to take a moment and talk about some of the stuff that can kind of creep in around the edges that empathy can combat if we understand it's happening. These are things that fall along the lines of bias, that fall along the lines of stereotyping, that are things that we do subconsciously and probably don't even realize they're happening. We have to understand biologically how our brains are made. If you look at a lot of the other animals that are out there, our brains are a lot bigger pound for pound than other species. It's the way we've developed, right? Supposed to be one of the things that set humans apart. That's fantastic. But because our brains are so big, they use a lot of energy, which for humans means calories. The thing is that our brains over time have found a way to be more efficient calorically so that we don't lose as much energy thinking. One of these things that we do is we create what are called heuristics, or a rule of thumb. And basically it's a way of saying all things fit into this category, or all things fit into that category. And we all know logically that that's not the case, but it's what our brains do, because then instead of thinking about every single detail of something, it can jump from the beginning to the end. For example, you might see a cat, right? And this cat, you can look at it and you can be like, oh, well, it has green eyes and it's kind of missing a whisker. And this cat's extremely sweet. And this cat is purring and seems to be very affectionate, and it has such a cute little personality. Or you can look at a cat and go, cat, and it falls into this big category of cat. And whatever cat means to you, small, furry, mouser, whatever. Your brain can take all the steps of going, oh, look, the cat has this whisker and this eye and this disposition and this personality, and this is a cat. Or your brain can look at it and go, cat. Neither good nor bad, but that's what happens. And as anybody who has ever had cats knows, to say that all cats are a mouser, are cuddly, are mean, you can't. They're just as diverse as humans in some ways. But this is what our brains do. Now, back in the hunter-gatherer times, that might have been fantastic. If you look in the brush while you're out and you see, ooh, tiger, danger, and you get out of there. You don't need to see every whisker on that cat to know that this is going to be a dangerous cat, or at least maybe it could be, and survival is important. There's a reason that our brains have come to do this, and it's not a bad one. However, we need to be aware that we do this because it doesn't always have a place in our modern society, because we can overlook the things that make us great, that make human beings interesting and unique and more capable in some ways than others. Things get lumped together and it just isn't effective. Here's an example. I was involved in some interviews this week, and one of the people on my committee immediately jumped to a decision about one of our candidates because of their gender, because of their age, and because of their ethnicity. And he didn't even realize he had done it. When we went back and said, let's take a look at the resumes, let's take a look at the earlier interviews, let's decide, is this actually the best of these two candidates? Because it was at the end. We were trying to choose who we were going to offer this to. and we actually laid it all out and looked at the facts, the other candidate was better. But this heuristic just kind of crept in without this other person even realizing it. And I think for us, for a lot of leaders, we really do try to not do that, but understanding how it happens can help us not to do it. So let's take a look at stereotyping in particular, which is a kind of heuristic. It says that all people that fall in this age category, for instance, are like X, right? All boomers are not tech savvy and have boomer rage, and they're old and stodgy. All Gen Z is lazy and attached to their phone. All Gen X is whiny because they don't feel they got any attention. All millennials are going to sit and fight with the boomers, because none of this holds true, not even a little bit. But these stereotypes are out there because we've said them over and over again. So how are stereotypes formed in our mind? The first thing that happens is called compression. What that means is you look at someone, and instead of understanding that they have all these different traits and all these different things that are part of them, which takes our brain time to figure out, we look at them and we go, it's this narrow band of traits, right? It's not a cat with one black whisker and really beautiful green eyes and a tabby coat and, oh, look, they have a white belly. It's cat fur. You've compressed this animal into a very narrow band of traits. Now, the problem with this is that, number one, it means you're no longer seeing the details, right? But it also means that you treat everybody in this category as more alike than different, which isn't the case, period. I mean, as human beings, we have as many different variations as possible within the same DNA set that we have. You can't treat a member of a group as more alike than different. There are going to be similarities. They could be cultural similarities. They could be ethnic similarities. They could be gender similarities. I mean, there will be patterns there, but you can't put it all in a box. It's like saying all Gen Xers are slackers. We're not. And I'm actually going to use the age stereotype a lot in this one, just because it's something that's come up a lot in the media lately. Well, yeah, for a while now, but I've seen a lot of it lately. So that's kind of where that's going to go. So the first thing that happens is compression. We compress the members into a narrow band with very limited traits. The second thing that happens is amplification, which means this small, narrow band of traits is amplified as being more important and more present than they actually are. Then this group looks like they're more alike, when really the reverse is true. They're going to be more different, right? So we've amplified the phone use of Gen Z, right? All Gen Z are attached to their phone and can't get off it. This is amplified as like a single trait. Never mind that my Gen Z niece is actually on the phone very little, is looking to actually better herself and become a mechanic specifically for women, that she is extremely active, that she's extremely generous, that she's extremely kind. She doesn't fit that narrow trait of, oh, well, all Gen Z are on their phone all the time and callous and don't care and have no social skills. I've just amplified that narrow band of traits and it left out everything else. The third thing that happens is discrimination. Now, understand that that word is another one that's gotten kind of a bad rap. And if done wrong, it isn't a good thing. But at the base of it, the word discriminate just means understanding the difference between this and this. You know, if you have discriminating tastes, it means that you want a certain thing. So if you discriminate in stereotyping, you're favoring certain categories over others, right? I want this group of ethnicity because they are hardworking, they are good at math, and they are all on time to the second. Even though there's no way that entire group of any ethnic, gender, age, anything is going to fit into that. We are all human beings. It's just not going to work. But now you're discriminating, you're favoring some people over others based on a compression and amplification that aren't real. That's the point. We're making these mental decisions based on something that doesn't exist. It's not real. The final step that happens is called fossilization. So it means you've compressed people into this category. You've amplified a very narrow band of traits. You're discriminating on one category based on the other. And now you fossilize it. You turn it to stone. So not only is everybody in this narrow band like this, but they always will be. That's it. Every cat that I've ever known is aloof and mean and will bite me. All of them. Well, but we all know that's not true, right? We all know logically that a person is a person and they're going to bring their own strengths and weaknesses. And that if a person wants to change, they can. Nothing is fossilized. Not when it comes to human behavior. It's too complex. Now here's the problem. We've done all of this, right? It's been compressed, amplified, discriminated, fossilized. The problem is this now in turn introduces bias. Just like what happened in that job interview. He was biased towards a certain group based on a quick rule of thumb heuristic. And we had to actually look at the facts to say, yeah, your quick idea of what this was going to be maybe isn't accurate. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind. As human beings, we do this naturally. It's a way to keep our brains going without using so many calories. We do it a zillion times every day based on all sorts of things. Whether it's that you don't like carrots because all carrots are woody and hard to chew, or you don't like the color blue because the color blue always looks terrible on me, or I don't like to hire this age group because they're always like X. We do it. We don't even think about it. Even the amount of verbiage that I put on it is more than actually happens. It's just part of who we are as human beings. So by understanding and being able to work around our brains so that maybe we're not doing this, or if we do, we can catch it, is paramount. Now let's talk about this in a leadership setting, right? Once you are able to take this, understand what's happening, you can actually ask yourself 2 questions, which will help you decide if you've stereotyped something or if you're actually looking at it clearly, right? So if you're going to do this and you want to be sure you're not categorizing, you can ask yourself 2 questions. Based on what I believe about this person, is it valid and is it useful? So let's go back and look at that. 2 little 3-word sentences, but they're trickier than they sound. It has to be valid. If I'm looking at someone for a job and I say, I can't hire them because they're a boomer, so they're old, they're unable to learn, and they're technologically unsavvy. Is it useful to think that? No, it's not, because I might be missing somebody with that much experience. I might be missing someone who's a very quick learner and can pick things up very quickly. I might be looking over someone who's actually taken a whole bunch of tests and can do all of it. What I'm looking at as far as that stereotype is not valid. Validity, for the most part, is usually pretty easy to determine. You can look at that on its face and say, yeah, that's not valid, right? But let's say, just for the sake of argument, that we decide, yeah, it's valid. This is a valid way of looking at this. The second question to ask then is it useful? Is it actually useful for me to use that quick rule of thumb heuristic and say that this person fits into this category? Now, our hunter-gatherer forebears, if they could get out of the way of that tiger quickly before they were eaten, yeah, that's real useful. It may not be valid. That tiger might not be a man-eater. Maybe the other one was, but this one may not be. So it may not be valid, but it was real useful because whether that tiger was going to eat him or not, they didn't have to worry about it. They just stayed away from tigers. In the modern day in leadership, immediately deciding that someone is something based on something they can't control is not useful. I've actually heard this come up a lot within people in the neurodivergent community. Number one, a lot of the assumptions people come to just aren't valid. They're coming to quick decisions based on a diagnosis of something. But even if it were valid, which it's not useful because you're turning away talent that could actually turn the tide of your organization. So not only is it not useful, it's detrimental. Being able to understand how our brains work and work around them is huge for those of us in leadership. Sometimes we get very busy. Sometimes there's a lot going on. Sometimes we're just plain overwhelmed. And these heuristics creep in just because there's a lot. I think that's what happened in this interview. This person was in a hurry to get in, get out, and get on with his day because he was overwhelmed. And I can understand that. Empathy says to try and understand and connect where another person is, right? And I can understand exactly what happened because he is completely swamped. However, by being able to logic through it and say, look, this is what happened. Here's where it happened. This is what we actually need to do. You compressed this person. I didn't go through the whole 4-step thing, but we did pull out the data that showed that the heuristic was a little bit off, that he had snapped to a decision because he was in a hurry. We can be better human beings. We talk about wanting to be version 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever that we'd be able to do in the future. And being able to understand how our brains work and what we do is a massive part of this. Thank you so much for being with me today on this. And I do think it's important. It's funny because for a lot of people, not all people, but if you get a machine, you get a car, you get a fridge, you get a whatever, you at least look at the manual enough to understand your warranty and kind of basically how it works, right? We understand how that stuff breaks down, but we don't take the time to figure out how we work, how our brains work, how maybe they worked great 100 years ago, but they aren't made so well for modern society and an integration with technology that we have going on now. We need to understand this because the leaders who can are going to be set to be able to take the future. The leaders who can't are the ones that are always going to be looking backwards and not really understand why they're being left behind. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening in on this conversation. My book, The Empathic Leader, drops July 15th. It's already open on Amazon for the Kindle version pre-sale and would love to have you in on all the conversation. Dr. Melissa Robinson-Winemiller here. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time for the next episode of The Empathic Leader.